morning and welcome back to our series on Ephesians. We're in Ephesians chapter 6 this morning. Let's get into the verse. We're going to read 6 through 9. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people, because you know that the Lord will reward each one of you for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. And masters, treat your slaves in the same way, and do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him. So as we look at these verses, again, this is continuing with this theme that we looked at the last 2 days on submission. One, we're all to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. We're to live a life of submission, as we talked about. Then it talks about wives being able to submit to their husbands, and husbands loving their wives as Christ loved the church. And now we see here a call for the children to remember their parents, right? So Paul's still writing here. They would often read these letters to the church. So he's writing here to the children in the church saying the first commandment with the promise is that of obeying your parents, that it may go well with you, that your life may be long, basically, that you might be blessed in the land that you live. So this is all having to do with proper attitudes, interpersonal attitudes, proper governance and societal, communal attitudes, if you will. And this is what we often forget. Our relationship with God isn't just one of me and God, or a personal relationship with God. It's a communal relationship with God as well. Next, fathers are told not to provoke or exasperate their children, instead raising them up and training them in the instruction of the Lord. So just because children are called to obey you, and wives are called to submit to you, you're to love your wife as Christ loved the church, and you're to train your children up in the way of the Lord and being kind to them, being loving, instructing them in the Lord, not ruling over them with an iron fist, so to speak. So again, we're people under submission to God, and we're given authority, and people are called to submit to us, but we're to use that rule and authority as God does, right? Not in a cruel way, but rather in a caring way. And so this has to do with proper attitudes and structures. And so this call to children to obey their parents, fathers to be kind and loving in the way they instruct their children, not provoking them. And even here to slave to master. Now, a lot of times this verse, people say, why does the Bible condone slavery? Paul is just dealing with the reality that is the world then. And slavery was much different in the ancient culture than we think of it perhaps in American culture. A lot of times they could buy after a certain time, can buy their freedom. That's why Paul elsewhere says, if you can buy your freedom, do so. It's better to be free than a slave. But here he really says, hey, remember, we're all slaves of Christ. So let us act in an obedient way. But the call here is that, hey, if you came to Christ and these men owe you 5 years of service or whatever, you need to treat them right. You don't just be harsh on them because they owe you this treatment. That you have to answer to God, because ultimately you're God's servant. You are one who is in authority but must answer to that authority. And even if you're to these servants here or slaves here, that they are to work as unto the Lord, and not just saying, hey, you know what, I feel like I got a raw deal, and so I'm not going to work to this person. No, especially if that person's a believer, there should be a harmonious relationship here. And we can almost picture it like one today of a manager and a low-level worker. This guy might be making minimum wage, and he might be like, you know what, this manager's making way more than me, and I'm not going to work hard for him. But Paul's saying, no, right? You need to work hard as unto the Lord, and managers, you need to manage as God manages. And so everything here is to keep the church in order, to keep people's attitudes caring and loving, and making sure there isn't mistreatment, and making sure that we do see each other as brethren. And so may we have that attitude as we hear this today. Have a blessed day.